Welcome back, everyone. So we've seen the application we're going to build, so let's start building it. First thing we need to do, though, is set up our development environment. First, let's create a directory to put our application, and we'll just call it React Star Wars. All right. After that, let's create a simple package.json. Now let's start installing our dependencies. So the first thing we want to install, we're going to install all our production dependencies. So that'll be React, React DOM, Redux, React Redux, and then also the Redux Thunk middleware. Now that all those are installed, let's install our dev dependencies. So first, let's install the Babel stuff. So we need Babel core. We need the Babel preset of ES 2015. We also need the preset for React. So that'll be Babel preset React. Now we're going to use a newer version of Webpack just so we can be on the bleeding edge. So we're actually going to use 2.10 beta 27. We need to bring in some of our loaders for Babel. So we need a file loader. We also need the Babel loader. We also need to bring in the Webpack dev server, which will allow us to just really quickly get a dev server set up with Webpack, and it'll have hot module reloading and all that stuff set up when we get it all finished. And again, we're going to use a newer version of the Webpack dev server, so we're going to use 2.10 beta 11. And then we're also going to use the React hot loader, which will allow us to set up hot module reloading so we don't have to refresh our page all the time. And again, we're going to use a newer version of it, which is 3.0.0, and then we're going to use the beta 6. So now that all of that is installed, I'm going to do everything in Sublime, but you're welcome to do it in whatever you want. And we first need to create our entrance file. So our entrance file is actually going to be at source app.js. And let's just start importing some stuff. So we're going to use ES 2015 imports, and we're going to bring in React, React DOM. We're also going to bring in an app component that we will bring in really soon. And then lastly, we're going to bring in the app container, and we're going to pull it out of the React hot loader. And this is all part of setting up the hot module reloading. Next thing we need to do is we need to require our index.html page, and this is all part of how Webpack works. We need to make sure that Webpack knows about our index.html file so that it can move it. We then need to get a reference to our container. And then last thing we need to do is we need to render our component on screen. And we're going to render that using React DOM. And then the next thing we need to do is essentially wrap all of this stuff in some boilerplate code. So I'm just going to copy and paste some stuff in here. And this code essentially checks if the module is hot, and if it is, it will accept the hot module loading on our app component and then render all of this stuff. A lot of this is boilerplate code. I copied it from online, so a lot of this documentation is out there. Now that we have this, we need to create our app.js file. So we need to create a components directory, and then inside it, put an app.js file. For now, this is going to be a very simple component. We just need to import React. We now need to create our app component. And through this entire video series, I will be using ES6 arrow functions. Then we just need to export this component. So inside here, we need to have a div with a class of container. And then inside there, we need to have a div with a class of row. And then inside there, we're just going to spell out hello world. Now we need to create our index file. So we're going to create that in the source directory. Let's change the name on it just for the heck of it. And then I'm also just going to copy and paste in some CSS that I've made. This first part is just bringing in Bootstrap and a Bootstrap theme just to give us some quick styles. And then I've also changed a couple of styles just to kind of space things out. And then there's two more things we need to do. We need to first create our container element that we grabbed earlier. And then we also need to bring in our JavaScript file, which will be created by Webpack, and we'll do all that very shortly. And it's gonna end up being called app.bundle. Now we need to create our Webpack config file. So in the root directory of our application here, we need to create a file called webpack.config.js. And I'm just going to copy and paste the setup here. It's pretty simple. We're pulling in Webpack and bringing in path from Node.js. Our entry is going to be React hotloader/patch. Again, that's all for setting up hot module reloading. And then giving it our source app.js we created earlier. Our output is going to be a build directory, which will automatically be created by Webpack. And then we're also outputting it as app.bundle.js. We've got two very simple loaders in here. We've got a file loader, and that'll essentially grab our index.html when it sees it, and it'll make sure that it ends up in our build directory. And then we're also running all our JavaScript files through the Babel loader, which will make sure it transpiles everything correctly. And then I'm using the name modules plugin down here, which will just be used by the hot module reloading. So when we're developing, it'll output what files got changed when it updated. Let's now configure Babel with a .babelrc file, and this will go in the root directory of our application. So first we have our presets, and these presets are the ones that we brought in earlier. So we brought in React, and we also brought in ES 2015. And then we're also going to bring in plugins, and again, this is for hot module reloading, and this one is going to be React Hot Loader Babel. And that will make sure that hot module reloading works correctly. And then there's only one more thing we need to do. This isn't necessarily something we have to do, but we can add a script in our package.json file that will run a big command for us so that we don't have to run it. And I'm just going to copy and paste that command in here. We're running our Webpack dev server with hot and inline, so that makes sure hot module reloading works correctly. Our content base is source, so that's where it'll get a lot of our source files from. And then we're just telling it to go ahead and open the web page when we start up the dev server. So now that we have all that set up, okay, so let's run our server. npm run serve. And we brought it up, and it looks like nothing popped up. So let's see what it says out in the terminal. It says it can't resolve some of our files, so let's take a quick look. And yep, I have to give it a relative directory or a relative path, and that should fix everything. Okay, so let's check back in our web page. And I added that there when I didn't need it. So again, come back here, everything looks good. There's our hello world. So after we fix those couple of mistakes, which I'm sure a lot of you saw as I was going through, we now get our hello world output to our web page. So now that we have that set up, we can actually get started making the first piece of our application, which will be setting up Redux in our application.